We've all done it. When you run out of milk at home, you pick up your phone and you order it, and then you order three other things that you don't really need because it's going to come in 10 minutes anyway. That's the promise, right? A 10-minute delivery. It's become a defining feature of living in urban India that anything you want, you can have in 10 minutes flat. The Labour Ministry has now told these quick commerce companies to drop the 10-minute promise because it believes that that kind of marketing creates dangerous pressure on delivery workers and it could encourage unsafe driving. Here's the big question we're asking in this video. Does dropping that promise actually improve worker rights in any way, or is it just low-hanging fruit to make a headline and make the problem temporarily go away? Remember, like, share and subscribe and sign up for our membership. If you do, it will really help us do a better job in giving you this information. Let me start off with what the Labour Ministry has done. Now, here's the thing. There's no government order that has come out, or it's not a rule or a decision made by government. We only know it because apparently there was a meeting between the Labour Ministry and the heads of these companies. It was a closed door meeting, as been reported by Reuters. And after that, Blinkit decided to drop that claim. This is what we know. We don't have a piece of paper from government. So the Labour Ministry apparently, according to this report, told quick commerce companies to stop using the 10-minute delivery promise or claim in their promotions. They're saying that it puts pressure on delivery workers. Reuters reports that the ministry raised it in a closed-door meeting, saying unsafe driving, pressure on workers and wider labour conditions. Now, it's an important clarification. We must remember that the government has not banned fast delivery. It hasn't changed the business model or the delivery model in any way. There is no legal ban in delivering in 10 minutes. They can continue to deliver in 10 minutes. They have just nudged these companies to stop promising that they will deliver in 10 minutes. So quick commerce remains completely legal in this country. Promising that you will deliver in 10 minutes has been sort of nudged and said, mat karo. That's what we are at right now. So that's an important clarification I felt in this story. Basically saying stop building your business models on this idea that people can expect something in 10 minutes. So what have the businesses announced? After that government intervention, Swiggy has changed or removed the 10-minute delivery claim from its app. Zepto has stopped promoting 10-minute delivery language. Blinkit has started pulling back on its 10-minute delivery tagline. Reuters specifically notes that Swiggy and Zepto updated their apps. And the key line that Reuters has said in its article is that Blinkit has said there is no operational change. So nothing is actually changing on the ground. Only that promise on the app apparently is coming down. The question remains, what is the real change that's going to happen from this move that the government has done? Remember, Raghav Chadha, who sort of campaigned for some sort of change, has basically called this a victory. Is it really a victory? And if yes, for whom is it a victory? That's what we're going to ask. Now, let's take a look at what quick commerce is. Now, quick commerce effectively in our country happened during COVID, when we all started ordering things to come home. That is when there was this disruptive idea that instead of keeping the warehouse at the outside of the city, which is what was happening up till then, if we bring small warehouses like Kirana stores into every neighborhood, with a limited number of things, those things can arrive in less than 10 minutes. So Reuters pegs this industry at $11.5 billion and it's growing rapidly. And it has these micro warehouses inside your neighborhoods. They're called dark stores. And they're dark stores because they're not Kirana stores. You can't actually walk up to them and buy anything. They're just warehouses. You can't even tell that they're there. There's hyper-local inventory, which basically means they can use the algorithm to find out what this particular neighborhood is ordering, and they can stock those things, and that's how they basically make it work. And of course, there are delivery targets. Now, labor is at the center of all of this because none of this works without the labor that's actually delivering these things. Riders are paid per order. Ratings affect their earnings. Incentives are timed to timing. So how many orders they are able to actually meet. Missing a target will mean losing money. Now, labor advocates who've been looking at this have warned that this encourages reckless driving and punishes workers because they're trying to meet unrealistic targets. Now, I want to give you an example. In the month of January alone, and we are only 15 days into this month, one delivery agent fell from a moving train in Andhra Pradesh. One delivery worker was hit by a BMW in a hit and run incident in Chandigarh. So there have been repeated cases, and we've all witnessed it on the road, of reckless driving or putting themselves in danger. And that is the main problem that's also come up. Now, apart from the fact that people are complaining that they are actually hurting themselves and others on the road, there is the idea of gig economy to begin with. Now, let me explain to you what gig economy is. Now, gig economy effectively are entire businesses that rely on temporary or part-time positions by independent contractors. So, by theory, a gig worker has flexibility and independence. You can decide when you want to work, you can decide whether or not you want to work today. It's completely in your hands. Isn't this a wonderful world? Everything is hunky-dory. No, the gig economy workers actually fall through the cracks between the laws that are made for permanent employees who are on the rolls of companies and of freelancers. And I'll tell you why. Because even though it's considered that they can work whenever they want to, unless they work a backbreaking 12 or 14 hours, they don't hit the kind of volumes they need to hit in order to make the incentives, in order to make any money to make all of this worthwhile. And that's the fundamental problem, that they're having to work as hard as, if not harder, than full time employees in order to make the incentives. And if they don't make the incentives, then the petrol and all of the other, the mobile cost and everything else just doesn't get covered. It doesn't make sense. But they don't have any of the benefits of full time employees. Now, we've had these benefits as full time employees from the time we had independence in this country. You have PF, you have health insurance, you have Sundays off, you are supposed to have a 1 hour lunch break, you are supposed to have 2 tea breaks. Every factory worker, everybody who works in an office has an entitlement to many benefits as employees, in this country. But these particular workers don't have that entitlement because they're considered freelancers, but they work as hard as full-time employees. According to Niti Aayog in 2022, they were at that point 7.7 million gig workers across our country, and that is only going to grow and boom. Now, you'll remember starting Christmas in December, and of course New Year's Eve, there was a gig workers union that said that they were going on strike. Now, the strike was not widespread across India. Not all of them had the ability, because it was also their highest earning night. Many didn't join the strike. But I want to take a look at what those striking workers were actually demanding. One, they were demanding better pay, so better payment per delivery. Incentives, they said, were algorithm based and unpredictable. So they were not actually able to predict that if I do this much, this is how much I will make, because the incentive format changed every day based on the orders of the customers, and their real earnings would drop and targets if the targets were not met. So they wanted a change, and they wanted transparency in that. They wanted accident insurance, medical support, and compensation for injuries. Doesn't sound unreasonable. They wanted reasonable work conditions. So algorithmic penalties. If they're not working these many hours, there is a penalty that hits them. Shift structures and non-coercion through rating and targets. So that is what they were demanding. Have they got that? No. What they have got is a government who sat down with arguably the biggest companies in terms of the startup industry right now, and found a way out where we've got a big headline saying they're no longer going to promise 10-minute delivery. But what does that actually mean? Let's take a look at what will improve from this change and what will not improve from this change. First of all, what will improve is that if the branding doesn't promise 10-minute delivery, then customers are not going to feel entitled to that speed, which means they perhaps not complain as much, they will not rate lower, and they will escalate more. So dropping the slogan could see lower expectations from customers in terms of speed. It will reduce the pressure on supervisors and on targets, and will reduce penalty linked time obsession, we hope. It could translate to slightly longer delivery windows for them, fewer punishments and late deliveries, and reduced accident risks. What it will not fix: minimum wage security, employee status, paid leave, guaranteed hours, overtime protection, algorithm transparency, and collective bargaining rights in terms of a union. These things do not change at all. So there's actually not been a labor rights reform. What there's been is like a nudge from the government to these companies on the safety front at all. So this is the sort of legal backdrop against where all of this is happening. Now I must also tell you that India's Code of Social Security 2020 gave legal recognition to gig workers, and this was a big problem before, and then in 2020 they made some change. They said gig workers, platform workers, and there was talk about social security, disability cover, accident insurance, old age protection, and things like that. The Press Information Bureau, which puts out press releases from the government, has said this formally brings gig and platform workers into the ambit of social security. But by giving them a label and a name, you are recognizing them, you're not implementing it. So there was no rule saying this had to be implemented. There was no rule saying that every company that uses a gig worker must give them insurance, must give them PF, must give them benefits. Because if you do that, you will change the business model. And the only reason why we are able to have this quick delivery to our houses is because these people are being underpaid. And they're being underpaid not per delivery, they're being underpaid because they're not getting any benefits. And that's the gray area that we are at. Because on one hand, people will argue that, hey, if you force these companies to pay differently, you are manipulating the free market and the capitalist system, and you are actually throttling any sort of innovation in the country. On the other side, there'd be an argument that there is a law in this country that says if someone works a certain number of hours, they're entitled to certain benefits. Why shouldn't these workers also come under that law? And that is the gray area in which all of these companies actually function. And these are not small companies anymore. These are massive, big companies. Because like I said, for these workers, recognition by the fact that the government has said that they are called gig workers and they are entitled is not the same as benefits in their bank account. The company, the government themselves have not funded their entire idea. State and central are not coordinating. Each state is doing something different. And as a result, when people ask, will dropping the 10-minute delivery promise improve worker rights? Worker rights will only improve if social security is implemented at scale. The question that we have to ask ourselves as a society is, are we a society that implements workers' rights for everyone at scale as a rule, or are we a society that bats for disruption in our market and innovation by our startups, while saying that, okay, they have found this labor loophole, and by doing this labor loophole, they are able to create these great businesses, and we should allow them to create great businesses. So that's really a question for us to answer as a country and as a society. The things to watch out for in the next few weeks or months is whether internal delivery targets will change. What happens on the inside of these apps for these delivery people? Does that change at all? Or is that just a slogan on the outside of the app that has changed? Will they continue to be penalized for taking longer to deliver? Is there going to be any accident and disability coverage introduced for them? Were they in the room when this was being discussed in any way? Was there any representatives of the workers in the room when the labor ministry was speaking to these companies, or did they only speak to the owners of the companies and the investors of the companies? That's an interesting question. And right now, it doesn't even look like the government has formally intervened. It looks like the government has suggested, nudged, said, hey, it would be nice if you did this. And these companies have decided that, okay, we'll do it for you. But again, the question to ask as citizens, as members of a society, as as citizens of a country is, did the government fail to intervene? Did these companies, fail to implement? What really went on here? And where did that crack widen, where all of these gig workers have fallen further down that crack again? The government has not banned quick commerce. They have not banned speed. They have not banned the back-end sort of incentive model that is being used right now. All they have said is drop the 10-minute delivery. It might reduce the pressure. So we'll have to actually watch and see if that does reduce the pressure. And we'll also have to wait for a response in any way from these unions who were representing these labor workers on whether or not this has made any change to them at all. Leave me a comment in the comment section, because I think this is an interesting question. Should we as a country support innovation and disruption, or should we be the kind of country that says, no, labor laws are uniform and apply to everybody who works. And if that is the case, then we can examine whether labor laws actually, apply to people who work on construction sites. Do they apply to people who work, in domestic roles in our homes, for example? Do they get their time off? Do they get their breaks? Do they get all of the benefits that every single worker ought to get? Or is that a disruption of the capitalist way of life? Let me know what you think.